What's going on, everybody? My name is Daniel A. Spira, and today I was gonna make some fancy video or something, but then I said, you know what? It's my channel and I do what I want. So what I'm gonna be doing today is I'm going to be acting out the new Five Nights at Freddy's book. It's called The Fourth Closet, and it is by Scott Cawthon and Breed Wrisley, I think that's what it says there. And it's going to be get out of here, bud. It's going to be reenacted by yours truly. So here we go. Chapter 1. I don't know how many I'll do, but we'll see how it goes. Chapter 1. Charlie. John clambered through the rubble to the place she had been, choking on the dust of the explosion. The ruins shifted beneath his feet, and he stumbled over a block of concrete, and he caught himself just before falling. He scraped his hands raw. He was acting frantically at the surface. He reached it, the place where she'd been. He could feel her presence beneath him. He took hold of an immense block of concrete and hefted it with all his strength. He managed to tilt it from the pile and overturn it, where it fell with a thud, rattling the ground he stood on. Over his head, a steel beam creaked, wavering precariously. Charlie! John cried her name again as he shoved another block of concrete away. Charlie! I'm coming! He was gasping for breath, moving the remains of the house with desperate, adrenaline-filled strength. But the adrenaline was running thin. He set his jaw and pressed on it. His palm slipped. Oh, snap! As he tried to lift the next one. And when he looked, he realized, dazedly, that his hands left streaks of blood wherever they touched. He wiped his palms on his jeans and went at it again. This time the broken concrete moved, and he balanced it on his thighs and took it 3 steps away, then dropped it on a pile of just kidding. It crashed down onto the rubble and shattered rock and glass beneath it, starting an avalanche of its own. And then, beneath the sounds of wreckage, he heard her whisper, John. Charlie! His heart stopped beating as he whispered back to her, and again the rubble moved under his feet. This time, he fell, landing hard on his back, knocking the wind out of it. He struggled to inhale, his lungs useless. Then haltingly, he began to breathe. Oh my God. He sat up lightheaded and saw what the cracks had revealed. He was in a little hidden room in Charlie's childhood house. Before him was a plain, smooth metal wall. At the center was a door. It was only an outline, without hinges or a handle, but he knew what it was because Charlie had known. When she stopped running in the midst of the escape and pressed her cheek against the surface, calling to someone or something inside. John! John! And the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the walls of the ruin. John got to his feet and put his hands on the door. Oh yeah, this is a nice door. And it grew colder, like it was draining the warmth from his skin. John pulled back and rubbed the cold spot on his face. Again, still watching the door, the shiny metal began to dull before his eyes. its color paled, and then the door itself began to thin. Its solidity vanished until it looked like frosted glass, and John saw there was a shadow behind the glass. The figure of a person. The figure stepped closer. The door something clarifying until he could almost see through it. He moved closer, mirroring the figure on the other side. It had a face, sleek and polished. Its eyes, like a statue's, sculpted but unseeing. John peered through the door between them, his breath clouding the near-transparent barrier. Then suddenly, the eyes snapped open. The figure stood placidly before him, the eyes fixed on nothing. They were clouded and unmoving, dead. Someone laughed, a frantic sound that echoed the small sealed room, and John looked wildly around for the source. The laughter rose in pitch, growing louder and louder. John covered his ears with his hands as the piercing noise became unbearable. "Charlie!" he cried again. John jerked away, his heart racing. A laughter went on, following him out of the dream. Disoriented, his eyes darted around the room and landed on the TV, where a clown's painted face filled the screen. Hot in a convulsive fit of laughter, and John sat up, rubbing his cheek. Oh man, that stupid watch. He checked the time. He checked the time and breathed a sigh of relief. He had just enough time to get to work. He sat back, taking a moment to catch his breath. On the TV screen, a local news anchor was holding a mic up to a man dressed as a clown, complete with a painted face, a red nose, and a rainbow-colored wig. Around his neck was a collar that looked like it belonged in a Renaissance painting. But he was wearing a full yellow clown suit with red pom-poms for buttons. "So, tell me," the anchor said brightly, "did you already have this costume? Or did you make it especially for the grand opening?" John switched the TV, saying, "What the hell is this?" and headed for the shower. After the shower, he'd been at it all day with the noise, but the noise was still unbearable. A rattling, clinging something punctuated by shouts and the intermittent, earth-shaking clatter of jackhammers, okay? John closed his eyes, trying to blot it out. The vibrations resounded in his chest, filling him up. And amid the noise, the sound of desperate laughter suddenly rang in his ears. The figure from his dream came to him again, just out of sight, and he felt as though if he just turned his head the right way, he could see the face behind the door. "John!" John turned. Louise was standing a foot away, giving him a puzzled stare. "I called your name 3 times, he said. John shrugged, gesturing at the chaos around them. "Hey, some of the guys are going out after this. You coming?" Louise asked. John hesitated, of course. "Come on, it'll be good for you, man. All you do is work and sleep, sounds like me." He laughed good-naturedly. "What?" Right. Good for me. John smiled and looked at the ground as the expression faded. I just have so much going on right now, okay? He tried to sound convincing. I don't know if he was. Right. Yeah, lots going on. Just let me know if you change your mind, dog. He clapped John on the shoulder again and headed back to the forklift. John watched him stride away. It hadn't been the first time John had turned him down, of course. Not the second time neither, nor the third. But then again, it had occurred again. They'd eventually stop trying to call him. That there'd be a moment where they would just all give up on him. Maybe that would be for the best. Of course, this is what we all have to think. John! Another voice called. Now what? It was the foreman, of course, shouting at him from the door of his standalone office. A trailer that had been brought on site for the duration of the construction and sat precariously on a dirt ledge. John went across the construction site, ducking through a thing by the container's doorway. Moments later, he was standing across the furthest table from the foreman, the plastic wood textured paneling barely holding to the wall surrounding him. I've got a couple guys out there telling me you're being not so nice. I'm just focused on my job, that's all, man. John said, of course, forcing a smile. Oliver smiled unconvincingly. Yeah. Focused, Oliver mimicked. John dropped the smile, of course, startled. Oliver sighed. Look, man, I gave you a chance because your cousin said you're hard work, okay? I overlooked the fact that you walked off your last job and you never came back. You know I took a risk on you, man. John swallowed. Yes, sir. I know. Stop with the sir. Just listen to me, man. Look, I do what I'm told. I don't get in people's way. I don't understand the problem. Your reactions are slow, dog. You look like crap. You're daydreaming. You're not a team player. What? This is an active construction zone. If you're in La La Land, or you're not thinking about the safety of the other men out there, someone's going to get hurt or killed. I'm not saying you have to go measure ding-dongs in the toilet, but I'm saying you have to be on the team. They have to trust that you're not gonna let them down, man. You know, if something falls, they need you to be prepared. John gave an understanding nod. This is a good job, John. I think these are good guys out there, too. Work isn't easy to come by these days, you know? And I need you to get your together. Because next time I see you in the clouds, you're done. Just don't even show up. You dig? Yeah, I understand, John said numbly. He didn't move, standing on the carpet that came with the portable office, as if waiting to be dismissed from detention. All right, get out of here. John went, of course. The dressing down had taken up the last few minutes of his workday. He helped Sarah Gate put away some of the equipment, and then headed to his car with a muttered goodbye. Goodbye. Hey! Sarah Gate called after him. John stopped. Last call. John broke off, spotting Oliver from the corner of his eye. Maybe next time, he said. Sergey pressed. Come on, man. It's my excuse to avoid that new kid's place. My daughter's been begging to go there all week, man. Lucy's taking her. But robots creep me out, man. Just come with me. John paused, and the world grew silent around him. What place are you talking about? John said. So? You coming? Sergey asked again. John took a few steps backwards, as if he'd come too close to an edge. Maybe another time, John said, and walked decidedly to his car, of course. It was old and brownish red, something that might have been cool in high school. Now, it's just a reminder that he was just a kid who had moved on. A mark of status that had become a mark of shame within the space of a year. He sat heavily, a plume of dust shooting out the sides of the car seat as he dropped to him. His hands were shaking. Get a grip. He closed his eyes and clutched the wheel, steadying himself. This is life now, and you can do it, he whispered to himself, and opened his eyes and sighed. Sounds like something lame my dad would have said. He turned the key. The drive home should have been 10 minutes, but the road he took was closer to half an hour, as it avoided driving through town. Yes, of course. If he didn't drive through town, then there'd be no risk of running into people he didn't want to run into or talk to. More importantly, he didn't risk running into the people he did want to talk to. Okay? Are we following along? Be a team player. He couldn't muster real resentment towards Oliver. Of course. John wasn't a team player. Of course he knew that. Not anymore. Not after what had happened. For almost 6 months, he had been coming and going from home to work and home like a train on a track, stopping to buy food now and then only, but not much else, of course. He spoke only when necessary, okay? Avoided eye contact with people. He was startled when people spoke to him, whether they were co-workers saying hello or strangers asking for directions of the time. He made conversations, but he was getting better at speaking while walking away. He was always polite too as well, but also making it clear he had somewhere to be. Made it obvious when necessary, of course, by suddenly turning in the other direction, maybe. Sometimes he felt like he was fading away, and it was jarring and disappointing to be reminded that he could still be seen. He pulled into the lot of the apartment complex, a 2-story building not really meant for long-term tenants. There was a light in the window of the manager's office. He had tried for about a month to track the open hours, but then he gave up. Including that there was no pattern. He grabbed an envelope from the glove compartment, of course, and headed to the door. He knocked to see if anybody was there, but there was no response. Now inside he could hear sounds or movement. He knocked again, and this time the door opened partially. An old woman with the skin of a lifelong smoker peered out at him. Hey, Delia. John smiled. She didn't smile back. Here's your rent check. John handed an envelope to her. I know it's a little bit late, but I came by yesterday and no one was here. Was it during business hours? Delia peered into the envelope. as though as suspicious to what might be inside. The lights were off, so then it wasn't during business hours. Delia bared her teeth at him. But it wasn't really a smile. I saw you hung up a plant, she said abruptly. Yeah, I did. John peered over his shoulder towards his apartment, as though he might be able to see it from where he was standing. It's nice to take care of something, right? John tried to smile again, but quickly gave up. Engulfed in a vacuum of judgment that allowed for no levity. That's allowed, right? To have a plant? Yes, you can have a plant. Delia took a step back inside and looked poised to close the door. People don't usually settle in here, you know? That's all I'm saying. Usually there is a house, then a wife, and then a plant. Or a dog first, whichever one you prefer. Great. John looked down at his shoes. It's just been a rough... He began, but the door closed with a firm thump. Yeah, it's been a rough year. John considered the door for a minute and headed to the ground floor apartment at the front of the complex, and now his for another month. It was a single bedroom unit with a full bath and half a kitchen. He kept the blinds up while he was away to show that he had nothing, of course. You know, he's trying to show nothing. The area was prone to burglaries, and it seemed like a safe bet to telegraph the fact that there was nothing to steal at his home. Of course. Once inside, John locked the door behind him and shut them blinds, and carefully slid the chain into place to lock that door. His apartment was cool and dark, and quiet, of course. He sighed and rubbed his temples. The headache was still there, yes, it was there. But he was growing accustomed to it. The place was partially furnished. It was bought that way. And he had added something to the living room to stack 4 cardboard boxes full of books by the window. He glanced at them with this disappointing familiarity. He went to the bedroom and sat down on his bed, the springs creaking stiffly beneath him. He didn't bother turning on the light, of course. There was enough daylight seeping through, from the dingy window above his bed. John looked towards him, looked at his dresser, where a familiar face looked back at him in a mirror, of course. Or no, it was a toy rabbit's head. Its body nowhere to be found. What did you do today? John said, meeting the plush rabbit's eye as if it might show a spark of recognition. Theodore just stared back blankly, his eyes dark and lifeless. You look terrible. Worse than me. John stood and approached the rabbit's head. He couldn't ignore the smell of mothballs and dirty feet. John's smiles faded, and he grabbed the bunny by the ears and held it in the air, like a sail. Time to throw you away. He considered it almost every day. He clenched his jaw and set it back on the dresser carefully and turned away, not wanting to look at it anymore. He closed his eyes, of course, not expecting sleep to come, but hoping. He hadn't slept well the night before, or the night before that, to add to that. He had come to dread sleep. He put it off as long as he could, walking miles and miles of road until late at night, returning home and trying to read, or just staring at the wall. The familiarity was frustrating to be able to do this. He grabbed his pillow and went back to the living room. He lay down on the couch, swinging his legs over the arms so he could fit. The silence in the little apartment was beginning to ring in his ears, and he grabbed the remote off the floor and turned on the televisor. The screen was black and white, and the reception was just horrible. He could scarcely make out faces through the static, maybe, but the chatter, what sounded like a talk show, was rapid and cheerful. He turned the volume low and then settled back, staring at the ceiling and listening to the television voices until suddenly he drifted into sleep. Her arm was limp, the only part he could see dangling from the twisted metal suit. Blood ran through in red rivers down her skin, pooling on the ground. Charlie was all alone. He could hear her voice again if he tried. "Don't let go, Joe!" She called my name. And then that thing. He shuddered, hearing again the sound of the animatronic suit snapping, crunching. He stared at Charlie's lifeless arm, as if the world around him had disappeared. And as the noise had echoed in his head, his mind conjured up thoughts unbidden. A crunching sound was her bones. The tearing is everything else. John opened his eyes with a start. A few feet away, a studio audience laughed, and he looked at the TV. Its static and chatter bringing him back to reality. John sat up, rolling his neck to work out them kinks. The couch was too small and his back was cramped. His head ached, and he was exhausted, restless. The shot of adrenaline still working its way through his system. He went out, locking the door forcefully behind him, and breathed in the night air. He started down the road, heading towards town and whatever might still be open. The lights on the road were far apart, and there was no sidewalk, just a shallow, dead dirt shoulder. He heard cars past him, but when they did, they loomed up from around corners or crusting hills, blinding him with headlights, and rushing by with force that sometimes threatened to knock him down. He had begun to notice himself edging ever closer to the road as he walked, playing a half-hearted game of chicken. When he found himself too far out, he would always take deliberate steps back to the shoulder. And it was always with a secret, sinking disappointment in himself that he would do so. As he approached town, lights pierced the darkness once again, and he shielded his eyes and took a step back from the road. This one slowed as it passed, then came to a sudden stop. John turned and walked a few steps towards it as the driver's window rolled down. "John?" someone called. The car went into reverse and haphazardly pulled onto the shoulder. John jumped out of its path. A woman stepped out, and took a few quick steps towards him, as if she might try to hug him. But he stayed planted where he was, his arms stiff at his sides, and she stopped a few feet away from him. "John, it's me!" Jessica said with a smile that quickly faded. John, it's me! What are you doing out here? She asked him. She was wearing short sleeves, and she rubbed her arms against the night air, glancing back and forth along the nearest deserted road. Well, I could ask you the same thing, he answered, as she had accused him of doing something. Jessica pointed toward John's shoulder. Gas, I'm getting gas. She smiled brightly at him, and he couldn't help but to mirror her a little bit. He had almost forgotten this ability of hers, to turn on cheerful goodwill like a faucet or a bottle of water, splashing it all over everyone. Have you been? She asked him, cautiously of course. Fine. Working most of the time, you know? He gestured down at the dusty work clothes he was wearing. He didn't bother to change out of it after he got home. What's new with you? He asked, suddenly aware of the absurdity of the conversation as cars passed by nearby. I really have to be going, so I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. He turned and walked away without giving her a chance to speak. I miss seeing you around, you know? Jessica called out to him. And so does she. John paused, digging at the dirt with one foot. Listen, Jessica took a few quick steps to catch up with him. Carlton's gonna be in town for a couple weeks, you know? It's spring break. We're all getting together. She waited expectantly, but he didn't respond, of course. He's dying to show off his new cosmopolitan persona, Jessica added brightly. When I talked to him on the phone last week, he was faking a Brooklyn accent to see if I noticed. She forced a giggle. John smiled pleadingly. Who else is going to be there, of course? He asked, looking directly at her for the first time since he got out of the car. Damn, girl! Jessica's was... John, you have to talk to her sometime. Why is that? He said brusquely and started walking again. John, wait! Behind him, John heard her breaking into a run. Yes, she caught up quickly, slowing to just a jog beside him, matching his pace. I can do this all day, you know. Tsundere. But John didn't answer. You have to talk to her, Jessica repeated. He gave her a sharp twing look. Charlie's dead, dog, he said harshly, the words rasping in his throat. It had been a long time since he spoke the words aloud. Jessica stopped in her tracks. He kept going, of course. John, at least talk to me. He didn't answer. You're hurting her, she added, of course. He stopped walking. Don't you understand what you're doing to her? After what she went through? It's insane, John. I don't know what that night did to you, but I know what it did to Charlie. And you know what? I don't think anything hurt as bad as you refused to speak with her. To say she's dead? I saw her die, dog. John stared at the city lights. No, you didn't. Okay? Jessica said this and hesitated. Look, I'm worried about you. I'm just lost. John turned to her. And after what I've been through, after what we've been through, That's not an unreasonable reaction. He waited a moment for her to respond, then looked away. I get it. I really do. I thought she was dead too. John opened his mouth to speak, but she pressed on. I thought she was dead until she showed up, alive. Jessica pulled at John's shoulder until he met her eyes again. I've seen her. Jessica said this, of course, her voice breaking, as if she were going to cry. I've talked to her. It is her. And this? She let go of his shoulder and waved his hand over him, as if casting a spell. This thing that you're doing? That's what's killing her, okay? It's not her, John whispered. Okay. Jessica snapped and turned on her heel. She walked back to the car and after a few moments pulled back out into the road and screeched out of there in a U-turn. John stayed where he was. Jessica roared past him, then stopped abruptly, her brakes squealing, then backed up to where he stood. We're meeting at Clay's house this Saturday, she said, tiredly. Please. He looked at her. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were shining. Her face was red. He nodded. Maybe. I might go. Good enough for me, I guess. I'll see you there, Jessica said. And we're gonna go ahead and cut this video off here, everybody, because it's already 37 minutes long. I believe that's close to the end of chapter 1. If it's not, well, we'll continue where we are. We are 28 minutes in, or 30 something minutes in. I'm not entirely sure which number to look at. But if you guys did enjoy this video, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, leave a comment down below. Make sure you buy the book yourselves, make sure you read the books, make sure you support Scott and Kira, and make sure you leave a comment down below and you tell me what's going on, what you guys think. If you want me to continue doing this, if maybe you just want me to do like the highlights, or if you want, I can do the whole shebang, reading and acting it out. I think it was actually pretty cool. I was going to upload another video, but then I said, you know what? It's my choice of what I want to upload, and this is what I want to do today. So this is what I did, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys on the next video. Bye-bye.